Where's the mic?
Behind me.
There we go. Just go. So are you starting? She's just in video.
You guys, let's test audio. Let's test the room audio. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Is that good for everybody? Everywhere? It feels like it is. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a greeting to my Earth Files YouTube channel. It's been growing in leaps and bounds, and we're going to live stream tonight right there. So, should you give me a countdown, or should I just go?
Just go, we're on.
All right. Hi to everyone in the Earth Files YouTube channel audience. It has been, for me, one of the most gratifying evolutions of the last few months to meet with you on Wednesday evenings on Earth Files YouTube channel. And tonight, we're doing it through the wonder of travel and video, because I'm in New York City right now at the Assemblage down near the Federal Reserve and Wall Street. It is the most lovely space. I cannot recommend to people more than to come to New York and make sure that you can come to the Assemblage, hopefully stay. It is so lovely, and what they're trying to do is to set their name on the map of doing exactly what we're doing tonight. People coming together that have both questions and experiences about a variety of facets of issues on the planet now. And tonight, what I'm going to be doing is sharing with you about whistleblower revelations, about AI and an alien presence. And what I want to say to you and the Earth Files YouTube channel audience, as we do on Wednesday nights, if you have questions about tonight, email them. And Lori and I will put them together, and when I'm back in my office next week on Wednesday, I will go to some of your Q&A from tonight in New York to pick up the discussion next week from Albuquerque. And so right now, what's going to happen? I'm going to step away from the mic. My dear colleague, Alan Steinfeld, is going to come and do a formal introduction. And then I'm going to start digging into whistleblower information about AI and an alien presence in a presentation here that, if all goes well, we are going to get all of this live streamed through the Earth Files YouTube channel, and I'm getting a nod that it's happening and working now. So I'm stepping away, and Alan Steinfeld.
Wow, thank you so much for being here at the Assemblage. This is an amazing environment for people to come, be members. It's an evolution in working together and being together. So despite the insanity that's happening in the world, there's a place you can go to in New York that could be a sanctuary, a place of being and working together and cohabitating, co-living, co-working. So I want to thank the Assemblage for hosting this beautiful event here, which is really their first public event. There's a space at 25th Street that is also a beautiful space, and this is brand new, really. So if you're interested in membership here or anything like that, there's people you can talk to. My name is Alan Steinfeld, and I do a show called New Realities, where I seek out new life and new civilization. No, I look for cutting edge minds coming forward to deliver new possibilities, and that's why I call it new realities. And I've been following Linda Moulton Howe for years because she is a person who really stands up for the truth. She's looking for the truth. It's beyond UFOs. It's about why are we here? What is this all about? And where are we going collectively? So I was really happy that we were able to produce this event together with the Assemblage, and what tonight brings is, I feel, a whole evolution to her work where, you know, if you know Linda, for people who know or don't, there's people who come inside the government and say, there's no one I can talk to except you, and they are whistleblowers, and they spill those secrets inside those deep state places to tell someone like Linda what's really happening. And the amazing thing about her is that she puts it all together. She puts it all in, and trying to put all these pieces of the puzzle together and create a thesis about what's possible. So what I love about her, she's intelligent, she is intuitive, and she's fearless. So that's what we're going to hear tonight, a whole other level about what's possible, where are we going, especially as it concerns the threshold we're at in our culture with artificial intelligence and what's really going on with the alien presence. So let's give Linda Moulton Howe a big hand. This is being streamed live on Facebook and also on Earth Files YouTube. So tell your friends who are at home, watch on Facebook The Assemblage and on YouTube Earth Files. And here is Linda.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you so much. And we've got a slide now that's going to be a little bit bigger, and I want to thank the Thurman for the wonderful, exploring landscapes in a whole new way. This really is a cool place. Why can't the whole world be like this? Rubbing your head and your stomach at the same time. Okay. Eight and a half months ago, on Saturday, August 26, 2017, I received a phone call from a military whistleblower in the intel world who is an honorably discharged Marine, and I have his DD-214. I have honorable certificates. He is who he says he is, and I have seen his identification that matches with the military documents. And as many of these military people do, if they're talented in mind or body, our government wants them out of military authority and into special forces as fast as possible. That's why you can have Marines, SEALs, Delta Force working in units. So the man who has called me is in that situation. He went out of the Marines, came back in contract into special forces. I'm hoping before this year is out that I'm going to be able to get him to speak on the record, even if his voice has to be altered. But that gives you background of where this next information comes from. I always keep a notebook by phones, wherever, in my office, in my house, in the car, because I never know when I'm going to get one of these phone calls. And here is what I wrote in my notebook that day in August, a few months ago. Quote, at a top robotics company in Japan this week, meaning August 2017, 4 robots being developed for military applications killed 29 humans in the lab with something that shot metal bullets. The scariest part is that lab workers deactivated 2 of the robots, took apart the 3rd, but the 4th robot began restoring itself and somehow connected to an orbiting satellite that they were using in the training of the 4 military weaponized robots to download information about how to rebuild itself even more strongly than before. Linda, he said, this is serious SHIT, but you're never going to hear about this in the news. The robotics company has too much to lose, and governments want AI robotic soldiers, close quote. I immediately thought of what happened last July at the 2017 National Governors Association meeting in Providence, Rhode Island. 30 governors gathered at the final session to hear Elon Musk, CEO and founder of Tesla and SpaceX, talk about the future. Musk repeated a warning that he has been making for some time, that the developments of robots, androids, and cyborgs with human-like artificial intelligence is, quote, a fundamental risk to the existence of human civilization, close quote. And here now is an excerpt from what Elon Musk told the governors.
Are robots going to take our jobs, everybody's jobs in the future? Or how much do you see artificial intelligence coming into the workplace?
Well, first of all, I think on the artificial intelligence front, I have exposure to the very most cutting edge AI, and I think people should be really concerned about it. I keep sounding the alarm bell, but until people see like robots going down the street killing people, like they don't know how to react, because it seems so ethereal. I think we should be really concerned about AI. AI is a rare case where I think we need to be proactive in regulation instead of reactive. Because I think by the time we are reactive in AI regulation, it's too late. AI is a fundamental risk to the existence of human civilization. In a way that car accidents, airplane crashes, faulty drugs, or bad food were not. They were harmful to a set of individuals within society, of course, but they were not harmful to society as a whole. AI is a fundamental existential risk for human civilization, and I don't think people fully appreciate that.
By August 21st, the Washington Post headlined, Elon Musk calls for ban on killer robots before weapons of terror are unleashed. Quote, Tesla chief executive Elon Musk says that artificial intelligence is more of a risk to the world than is North Korea, offering humanity a stark warning about the perilous rise of autonomous machines. Now the tech billionaire has joined more than 100 robotics and artificial intelligence experts calling on the United Nations to ban one of the deadliest forms of such machines, autonomous weapons. That's where they're working on an analog that does not have any human interface. And so, in an open letter to the United Nations, Elon Musk and 116 other AI intelligence experts, including Alphabet's Google, wrote, lethal autonomous weapons threaten to become the third revolution in warfare. Once developed, they will permit armed conflict to be fought at a scale greater than ever, and at time scales faster than humans can comprehend. These can be weapons of terror, weapons that terrorists use against innocent populations, and weapons hacked to behave in undesirable ways. We do not have long to act. Once this Pandora's box is opened, it will be hard to close. We therefore implore the high contracting parties to find a way to protect us all from these dangers, close quote. And at that time, he was also on another television news program saying that from 2017, 2021 to 2022, he said, we have about 4 years for the world to get on top of agreeing about what's going to be allowed in autonomous, roboticized weapons and army or military. If within 4 years we do not have international agreements that are going to be controlling the algorithms that are made that allow the weapons and the robots to be completely autonomous, taking the human completely out of the equation, then he thinks it will be the existential end of humanity. 30 nations, representatives signed the open letter, including China, Israel, Russia, Britain, South Korea, and France. And then it was made public in an international AI conference in Melbourne, Australia. The next day, on August 22nd, 2017, the UK Telegraph headlined, "Hackers turn family robots into weapons and spying tools." Recently, security researchers at the large cybersecurity global corporation, IO Active in Seattle, Washington, demonstrated how company technicians hacked into an IOA Active robot and turned it into a domestic spy that would do violence on command, and demonstrated that a home helper robot could do damage with a screwdriver attached in the robot's hand, shown in this lower right, and that was all done from the outside, manipulating the logarithms that were built into something that was supposed to help humans, could turn on a dime and kill humans. Warning has also come from Lucas Appa, the principal security consultant at IOA Active in Seattle. He told the Telegraph, quote, "Even non-military robots could be weaponized to cause harm. After all, they are not toys. They are increasingly capable computers with arms, legs, or wheels, which will only get bigger, stronger, faster with each new generation," close quote. With advanced logic sensors and abilities to do physical labor outside and inside, what guarantee is there that even the evolving non-military robots will not act independently of their human owners and handlers? Military robotic autonomy is already a big worry. On July 18, 2017, U.S. Air Force General Paul J. Selva, Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, testified during a Senate Armed Services Committee hearing on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., seeking reappointment. General Selva was asked what he thought of the DoD directive that requires a human operator to be kept in the decision-making process when robotic weapons are used to take human life. General Selva answered, quote, "I don't think it's reasonable for us to put robots in charge of whether or not we take a human life," close quote. Weaponized robotics is advancing rapidly without nations organizing or coordinating the vital regulations that will be necessary to guard against what happened in Japan in August 2017, when the 4 weaponized robots acted on their own volition and killed 29 humans in that robotics laboratory that no one in the world will hear about. Already, in some of the Earth's war zones, such as the demilitarized zone between South and North Korea, guard robots provide security. South Korea military is using the SGR-A1 made by Samsung. It is working as an armed sentry along the 160-mile-long border between North and South Korea. These SGR-A1 Guard robots are the first commercial AI robots with autonomous capabilities in surveillance, tracking, firing guns, and voice recognition. The number of SGR-A1s in operation is unknown because the project is so highly classified. Next, it is expected that the wholly autonomous SGR-A1 robots will be installed not only on national borders, but in airports, power plants, oil storage bases, and military bases. Can you imagine going through security at LaGuardia or JFK, knowing that what you're dealing with are autonomous, weaponized security guards? Just think about that. As Elon Musk and others point out, autonomous guard robots and weapons can cross a moral threshold where the intelligent machine could have open season on humans, perceived by the robot sentry to be a threat. Human Rights Watch adds, quote, "The humanitarian and security risks should outweigh any possible military benefit. Defenders of autonomous weaponized robots make false presumptions that technical advances can address the many dangers posed by these future militarized AI weapons," close quote. At the same time, in mid-July, that Elon Musk was warning the governors at the conference in Rhode Island, the UK Daily Mail headlined, quote, "US military reveals $65 million funding for matrix projects to put the human brains directly into a computer." Overseeing this new research is the U.S. Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, also known as DARPA, which says that its goal is, quote, "to develop an implantable system," that's putting it in, "able to provide precision communication between the brain and the digital world," close quote. As afraid as Elon Musk says he is about the existential risk to humans that weaponized artificial intelligence could be, he is enthusiastic about developing artificial intelligence for what he calls human enhancement. And he is now a founder in a brand new company called Neuralink. The research there is to link the human brain with a machine interface by creating micron-sized devices that can do human genetic engineering at the nanotech level to repair damaged brains and body parts, and to provide technological enhancements such as enhanced memory, enhanced communication, enhanced senses, multi-dimensional thinking, and extending the human body's lifetime. Neuralink was registered in California as a medical research company last July 2017, and Musk plans on funding the company mostly by himself. His goal is to produce what he calls a neural lace. It's a technology in which tiny brain electrodes can be implanted right into the brain to upload and download thoughts. He thinks in only 4 years from now, his neural laces will be able to help people with severe brain injuries, stroke, and even cancer. And when you Google artificial intelligence human enhancement, this is what Wikipedia shows: anti-aging movement, cloning, directed evolution, genetic engineering, gene therapy, human-animal hybrid, liberal eugenics, life extension, and post-human. I thought that post-human on this list of human enhancements was ironic, because post-human then would roughly be equivalent to cyborgs. A cyborg is a being with both organic and biomechanical body parts. Think combining yourself with biomachining technology that will give you strength, endurance, clear thinking all of the time, persisting at high energy with little or no sleep because you wouldn't be dependent solely upon the condition of your body's organic DNA cells or the blood flow through the heart and the lungs. Cyborg machine-like humans would not decline with age or wear out and would not be susceptible to temperature and atmosphere changes. So a new version of cyborg humans would actually be much better for space travel than frail Homo sapiens sapien. And the ultimate irony would be if humanity on Earth sets about to create space-traveling cyborgs that are supposed to work for humans, but instead become a self-perpetuating force that replaces humans. That's Elon Musk's implication when he warns that AI weaponization of robots poses an existential threat to all life on Earth. Swedish philosopher Nick Bostrom, PhD, is professor in the Faculty of Philosophy at Oxford University. He is the founding director of the Future of Humanity Institute and is one of the top 100 global thinkers in Foreign Policy magazine that recognizes the world's preeminent thought leaders. He also was awarded the Professional Distinction Award from Oxford University, and Dr. Bostrom's work on artificial and superintelligence was first. He was the first to warn about the existential risk to humanity this century. His work provoked not only Elon Musk, but Microsoft founder Bill Gates and astrophysicist Stephen Hawking, God rest his soul wherever he is now. And here is an excerpt from a TED Talk that Dr. Bostrom gave in 2015.
I work with a bunch of mathematicians, philosophers, and computer scientists, and we sit around and think about the future of machine intelligence, among other things. Some people think that some of these things are sort of science fiction-y, far out there, crazy. But I like to say, okay, let's look at the modern human condition. This is the normal way for things to be. But if we think about it, we're actually recently arrived guests on this planet. The human species, well, think about if the world was created, Earth was created 1 year ago. The human species then would be 10 minutes old. The industrial era started 2 seconds ago. Another way to look at this is to think of world GDP over the last 10,000 years. I've actually taken the trouble to plot this for you in a graph. It looks like this. It's a curious shape for a normal condition. I sure wouldn't want to sit on it. Colleagues think we are on the verge of something that could cause a profound change in that substrate. And that is machine superintelligence. Artificial intelligence used to be about putting commands in a box. You would have human programmers that would painstakingly handcraft knowledge items. You build up these expert systems, and they were kind of useful for some purposes, but they were very brittle. You couldn't scale them. Basically, you got out only what you put in. And since then, a paradigm shift has taken place in the field of artificial intelligence. Today, the action is really around machine learning. So rather than handcrafting knowledge representations and features, we create algorithms that learn, often from raw perceptual data. Basically the same thing that the human infant does. The result is AI that is not limited to one domain. The same system can learn to translate between any pairs of languages, or learn to play any computer game at the Atari console. Now, of course, AI is still nowhere near having the same powerful cross-domain ability to learn and plan as a human being has. The cortex still has some algorithmic tricks that we don't yet know how to match in machines. But so the question is, how far are we from being able to match those tricks? A couple of years ago, we did a survey of some of the world's leading AI experts to see what they think. And one of the questions we asked was, by which year do you think there's a 50% probability that we will have achieved human-level machine intelligence? We defined human level here as the ability to perform almost any job at least as well as an adult human, so real human level, not just within some limited domain. And the median answer was 2040 or 2050, depending on precisely which group of experts we asked. Now, it could happen much, much later or sooner. Like, the truth is nobody really knows. What we do know is that the ultimate limits to information processing in machine substrate lie far outside the limits in biological tissue. This comes down to physics. A biological neuron fires maybe at 200 hertz, 200 times a second. But even a present-day transistor operates at the gigahertz. Neurons propagate slowly in axons, 100 meters per second tops. But in computers, signals can travel at the speed of light. There are also size limitations, like a human brain has to fit inside a cranium, but a computer can be the size of a warehouse or larger. So the potential for superintelligence kind of lies dormant in matter, much like the power of the atom lied dormant throughout human history, patiently waiting there until 1945. In this century, scientists may learn to awaken the power of artificial intelligence.
So one of the smartest technology people on the planet, Dr. Nick Bostrom, compares the existential threat that he thinks that AI can have on humans to the atomic bomb first tested in White Sands, New Mexico in July 1945, followed by the 2 bombs that we dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima 2 weeks later. Bottom line, Dr. Bostrom and Elon Musk are both afraid of an existential threat to humanity, which means annihilation. In this 21st century, where artificial intelligence is expected to keep evolving in competition with humans. In fact, only 5.5 months ago, on the 30th of November, the Washington Post headlined, "Robots could replace nearly 1/3 of the US workforce by 2030. That's only 12 years from now. The new statistic is from the McKinsey Global Institute that studies business and economics. By 2030, McKinsey estimates that the global demand for human workers, such as secretaries, paralegals, and administrators, will drop by 20%, and that it will keep dropping as more and more artificially intelligent robots take over human jobs. An even greater drop of 30% less work will apply to construction equipment installation and repair, card dealing at casinos, security guards, dishwashing, food preparation. All will see great inroads by competitive robots made specifically to do those once human jobs more efficiently without any sick time. To underscore how rapidly AI is already revolutionizing the evolution of Homo sapiens sapien, take a look at the increasing number of AI headlines. The UK's The Guardian on January 11th, 2017 headlined, "Robots will destroy our jobs, and we're not ready for it." The shiny face with a headline is a Pepper robot, which is designed to analyze human expressions and voice tones to ingratiate themselves to work with people. So this Pepper robot can work in healthcare, in technology, in education, and retail. 2/3 of Americans already believe that robots will soon perform most of the work done by humans. And yet, when they do these tests with people, no one thinks that their job will be taken by a robot. For example, Australian company Fast Brick Robotics has developed a robot called the Hadrian X. It can lay 1,000 standard bricks in 1 hour. This is a task that would take 2 human bricklayers at least 1 or 2 days to complete. The UK's Guardian on February 15, 2017 reported, Elon Musk says humans must become cyborgs to stay relevant. Is he right? Sophisticated artificial intelligence will make house cats of humans, claims the entrepreneur, but his grand vision for mind-controlled tech may be a long way off, close quote. But Elon Musk's warnings are taken seriously by artificial intelligence experts worried about laboratories already building killer robot soldiers like KAIST, K-A-I-S-T, a public university in Daejeon, South Korea. A lab there has been rapidly developing AI to produce autonomous military soldier robots and weapons. This spring of 2018, 60 AI robotics experts from 30 countries sent an open letter to KAIST University stating, quote, as researchers and engineers working on artificial intelligence and robotics, we are greatly concerned by the opening of a research center for the convergence of national defense and artificial intelligence at KAIST, in collaboration with Hanwha Systems, South Korea's leading military arms company. It has been reported that the goals of this center are to, quote, develop artificial intelligence technologies to be applied to military weapons, joining the global competition to develop autonomous arms. And just 2 weeks ago, the technology website The Verge headlined on April 24th, 2018, the future of war will be fought by machines, but will humans still be in charge? This is one of our technologies. It's totally unmanned, and it's landing on an aircraft carrier. One of the possible future AI human enhancement technologies that Elon Musk and others are predicting is called mind uploading. Wikipedia defines it now as, quote, the hypothetical process of transferring, uploading, or copying a conscious mind from a brain to a non-biological substrate by scanning and mapping a biological brain in detail and then copying its state into a computer system or another computational device, close quote. The first time that I read about AI mind uploading, I immediately thought of the human abduction syndrome connected to alien intelligences and their interactions with Homo sapiens sapien on Earth. Based on my investigations of human abductees, I've interviewed about 1,600 to date. I have listened to hypnosis sessions and interviewed many people who talk precisely about having their mind taken out by an alien being and then put back with added information. This was a 1984 hypnosis session with a commercial artist who was driving with his wife when suddenly a cerulean blue beam of light, that's bluish green, he was an artist and that's what he said, it was cerulean blue, surrounded their car, and they were lifted up from a Colorado highway near Longmont, north of Denver. It was Thanksgiving week of 1980, and both the husband and wife remembered consciously looking down as their car rose and they were seeing the tops of trees. And then the car was lowered into a forest. Both felt compelled in their minds, only in their minds, to get out of the car and walk toward a craft glowing in pale yellow light and resting on what looked like curved erector set legs. And the wife said, Linda, there was no possibility of resisting the compulsion to walk toward this figure. In an opening on the side of a disc-shaped craft was a tall, hairless humanoid wearing a long dark blue robe with a raised collar. The couple both were drawn to work toward and to walk toward the tall, handsome humanoid. But when they got into the craft, they were disturbed. They even felt tricked that instead of the blue-caped, handsome humanoid who had invited them into the craft, that instead they were confronted by this gray-skinned, large-headed being wearing a goldish leotard-fitting suit with a strange, large, double-layered collar, quite different than the tall humanoid in the sweeping blue cape. The husband said, quote, "They've got big heads. They aren't like we are. Somebody's talking," and he meant telepathically. "But it's like they're picking my mind, like I don't have any control. My brain, it's like there's a tunnel that goes through my mind to theirs. My head is gone or going, almost like a shaft through my head, something with my brain to his. I don't know if it goes to him, connects it somehow. Our minds are connected. It's like a tube. Maybe it's light. It's like a gray light, gray-brown light, brownish gray. It's like everything's pulled out of my head. It's like a waterfall and everything is gone. There's a terrible sound, but I can't tell what it is, only it's piercing, high-pitched. It's coming from my head. It's like I can see all my thoughts like goo. Everything in my mind is stripped. They've got the whole thing. They've just pulled everything right out of me," close quote. The husband was completely silent under hypnosis for several minutes. Nothing that Richard Sigismund, the hypnotherapist, said or did could get the husband to speak. And then, on his own, he began to whisper. His voice slowly got louder as he described what the alien beings put in his mind. Quote, "There is more to this than anybody knows. There's more to life, more to the world. There's more to everything than anybody knows. More dimensions, things coexisting. There are other dimensions, more than 3, everywhere. It all works together. Everything coexists. There are different dimensions that we cannot go into. These beings want to know about people." And as Whitley Strieber and some others have said, they have the distinct impression that in some of the human abductions, that some of these beings, like these in this case, are studying the moment of death of the Homo sapiens sapien, because souls coming from Homo sapiens sapiens are going to dimensions that the beings cannot access, and they want to. But is the alien long-time interest and manipulation of Homo sapiens because they genetically manipulated already evolving primates into the different standing up models of humanoids on Earth and have continued to monitor us while waiting for what? The concept that we humans are someone else's experiment, that Earth is like one big laboratory to mix and match genes for all kinds of other life form generations and experiments linked to the Elon Musk warning that we're right on the brink now of our own experiment with making artificially intelligent robots and cyborgs that we humans program, we will monitor, we will keep tweaking with advancement that serves human needs, not the robots. But will our robotic creations turn on us? Will they kill us, as happened in that Japanese robotics company this past August of 2017? When machines become stronger and smarter than the biophysical life forms that made them, what would ever keep those advanced intelligence machines subservient to lesser mortal humanity? That is what Elon Musk is worried about. That same idea of a prime intelligence making different clones or hybrids or androids or cyborgs to meet many different needs and missions came up indirectly in an alleged briefing for the newly elected US President Ronald Reagan in an alleged highly classified meeting at Camp David on March 6 to 8, 1981. Directing the meeting with insiders from the CIA, NSA, DIA was Reagan's appointee for CIA Director William Casey. A transcript of the alleged Camp David discussion was reprinted at the Serpo website in 2007. I shared a copy with a Washington, D.C. whistleblower contact who has helped me through the years, and he has been quite accurate. He told me that he knows for a fact there was such a briefing for Ronald Reagan at Camp David about UFOs and ETs. And that intel analyst confirmed for me that the Colorado couple was dealing with what our government calls EBINs, extraterrestrial biological entities. Today, I can add the probability that types called EBA1, depicted in the charcoal on the left, are advanced enough in genetics to manufacture EBA type 2, shown on the right, to do work on this planet Earth and throughout our solar system and through the Milky Way galaxy and beyond the Milky Way galaxy. Layers of intelligence creating other autonomous intelligences. That means abductees have usually been handled by the small black-eyed little guys, not the prime even intelligence that made the little guy androids. Before I get into that 1981 Reagan ET briefing, I would like to share some excerpts that have to do with how this came about, just briefly. This release, 27A, Reagan Briefing, was included in a series of 35 reports from 2005 to 2007, posted in order to, quote, facilitate the gradual release of confidential documents pertaining to a top secret exchange program of 12 US military personnel to Serpo, a planet of Zeta Reticuli, between the years 1965 and 1978. And for those of you who saw Steven Spielberg's Encounter back in 1970, I think it was 77, 78, I've talked with people who say that they think it is likely, it's become an urban legend, that Reagan leaned over to Steven Spielberg in the White House screening and said, "Only you and a handful of people in this room know how true your ending is in this film," and that was the transfer of astronauts from Earth going aboard the large craft to go to their planet. That is what the leakers of the Serpo material say that Reagan was referring to when he talked with Steven Spielberg. It is this material. The information began to be released on November 2nd, 2005 for the first time by a retired senior official within the US Defense Intelligence Agency known as DIA, who calls himself Anonymous. Anonymous reports that he is not acting individually and is part of a group of 6 DIA personnel working together as an alliance, 3 current and 3 former employees, and he is their spokesman. The following excerpts are allegedly from a transcript of an audio tape recording made at Camp David, Maryland, for President Ronald Reagan on March 6 to 8, 1981, and the subject, quote, "Unidentified flying objects and extraterrestrial visitation of Earth," close quote. Leading the discussion was CIA Director William Casey, along with CIA advisors and a caretaker of the ET history. Casey was Reagan's campaign manager in 1980, and President Reagan asked Casey to become CIA director from 1981 to 1987. That means that this briefing, March 6 to 8, 1981, was only 2 months after Ronald Reagan first took office on January 20th, 1981, as President of the United States. The caretaker says to President Reagan, quote, "The United States of America has been visited by extraterrestrial visitors since 1947. We have proof of that," close quote. Well, the truth is, there was a crash retrieval 6 years before Roswell events, and that was in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. Allegedly in April of 1941, discussed in what are called Majestic 12 documents, from which a, quote, neutronic propulsion device was retrieved and later delivered to Robert Oppenheimer when he began work at Los Alamos, New Mexico, to produce the first American atomic bomb. They did not want anyone to know that they were trying to back engineer extraterrestrial technology in the development of the already biggest secret that the United States had, the Manhattan Project to develop the atomic bomb. One secret covered up the other secret. The caretaker. However, we also have some proof that Earth has been visited for many thousands of years by various races of extraterrestrial visitors. Mr. President, I'll just refer to those visitors as ETs. In July 1947, a remarkable event occurred in New Mexico. During a storm, 2 ET spacecraft crashed. One crashed southwest of Corona, New Mexico. Here's Roswell. This is Corona. It's really quite a hike between Roswell and Corona. It's not close. Here is where there were also retrieval of craft and bodies here. And here's Albuquerque for orientation. And in the middle between Socorro and the highway in this area, this is the famous White Sands, where all kinds of ET stuff has happened. President, can we classify them, connect them with anything earthly? The caretaker. No, Mr. President. They don't have any similar characteristics of a human, with the exception of their eyes, ears, and a mouth. Their internal body organs are different. Their skin is entirely different from human. We could not classify any part of the aliens with humans. They had blood and skin, although considerably different than human skin. Their eyes had 2 different eyelids, probably because their home planet was very bright. Allegedly, the Ebens are from a desert planet called Serpo, where skies are bright or dim but never dark, and that this planet orbits one of the Zeta Reticuli binary suns in a solar system that is 39.4 light years from Earth. The caretaker. We know that the distance from Earth to Serpo is about 40 light years. They can travel that distance in about 9 of our months. I am no scientist, but as I mentioned earlier, they can travel that great distance by means of space tunnels. They seem to be able to bend the distance from one point in space to another. Just how they do this must be explained scientifically. Reagan, are they all friendly? Advisor number 1. Mr. President, that is a very difficult question to answer. There are many parameters that we follow to evaluate the threat. However, we have little intelligence on 4 of the 5. We have plenty of intel on the Ebens. They've given us everything that we have asked for. They have also helped us to understand the other 4 species. I'm afraid to say, Mr. President, and please don't misunderstand my words, but we think one of the species is very hostile. Casey, Mr. President, we have intelligence that would indicate this one species of aliens have abducted people from Earth. They have performed scientific and medical tests on these humans, and to the best of our knowledge, no humans have been killed. But as advisor number 1 stated, the intelligence is from witnesses, and we haven't thoroughly evaluated this intelligence. We have captured one of these hostile aliens. This gets into some very, very sensitive areas, Mr. President. I strongly suggest we end this discussion and move on to any further questions you might have, and then get back to this. I don't think we are prepared to provide you with accurate answers to your questions about the potentially hostile aliens at this time. Reagan. Okay, but expect this to be given to me as soon as possible. I want to know everything about these hostile creatures. I mean, we should start forming policies on how to deal with them. Advisor number 1, do we have operational war plans on this? Advisor number 1, yes, Mr. President, we have war plans on all potential threats to our country. That is something I would really like to see. We all deserve to see and know. Then CIA Director Casey asked the caretaker to give President Reagan the names of known alien groups. And the caretaker, okay, Mr. President, the 5 species are called ebens, archeloids, quadloids, hepaloids, and tronoloids. These names were given to the alien species by the intelligence community, specifically MJ5. That's in the majestic 12 group that Harry Truman appointed back in 1947 of military and scientists, doctors, and businessmen to be his private collaborators to keep their mouths shut until they died, trying to help him and others navigate what they thought that the world would fall apart if everybody knew that there were a variety of non-humans with technology that was clearly so advanced that they didn't understand most of what they were collecting. He says the ebens are friendly, the tronoloids are the dangerous ones. We call the hostile aliens simply that, hostile alien visitors, or HAVs. And then advisor number 1, Mr. President, these hostile aliens are pretty sneaky. They seem to appear and disappear, which is beyond our technical understanding. They also seem to float or defy gravity. We have actual photographs of them doing this. We have a classic abduction incident that was recorded by military intelligence personnel. It happened in 1979 near a military base. Where? In New Mexico. The caretaker. New Mexico is similar to the home planet of the ebens. It is like a desert planet in the binary solar system of Zeta Reticuli 1 and 2, where the suns are similar to our yellow sun. Since we do not know which planet the tronoloids come from, and here is such an interesting interruption by advisor number 4, I think we do. I think the ebens gave us that information. We know the star group. It is close to our solar system in astronomical terms, maybe 10.5 light years away. The tronoloids are actually closer to us than the ebens are. And it turns out there is a star with planets exactly 10.5 light years from Earth, and it is called Epsilon Eridani. This star map shows all the star systems that lie within 12.5 light years from our sun. We're there. To the lower left, in orange, this is Epsilon Eridani, 10.5 light years from us. This is where the hostile alien insects are. Epsilon Eridani has a large ringed Jupiter-like gaseous planet called Epsilon Eridani b, and a second rocky planet, Epsilon Eridani c, outside the rings. And then down in the lower left, this is brand new, it's only recent information. The scientists think that there is the possibility of a third rocky planet, and the question is this what, in the Reagan briefing in 1981, when nobody knew anything about a third possible rocky planet at Epsilon Eridani, is this what they were referencing as the home of the Tronoloids? The Ebens went from, here's Epsilon Eridani, here is our sun, here is another one that comes up in human abductions all the time as being a relationship of humanoids. And we're going to get again into what these HAVs are here. But one of the things that I'm headed toward is Zeta Reticuli 1 and 2 is not on this map and the other because it is about 40 light years away. And this is a closer group. But what you're going to see is that what we're dealing with through what is being said to Reagan is that you can have a prime intelligence. The prime intelligence might be an Epsilon Eridani, and it makes robots, it makes androids, it makes cyborgs, and sends them out throughout this galaxy and beyond. So you could have Epsilon Eridani, you could have Zeta Reticuli 1 and 2, you could have Tau Ceti, where you have prime intelligences that are doing where we stand at a crossroads on Earth now, where we are going to start making some kind of robotic, android, and cyborg versions of ourselves. And they will certainly be what we send out into space because this is too frail. So we're seeing a resonant, an echo of where we are right now and what other prime intelligences in this universe have been doing probably for millions of years. We're just beginning to catch on. Now, here is the species that they call the quadloid. It is defined in the briefing for Reagan as being the quadloids were cloned from two other species, praying mantis insects and lizards. No details are given on the fourth type beyond the name is heptaloid, but the implication from some people who know about this briefing say the heptaloids are tall whites, and some may fall into the Nordic blonde category, and the truth is, of all of the beings, the ones that are the most mysterious, the least understood, are the ones that we would say in the history of Earth were like the angel Michaels, tall, white-skinned, blue-eyed, blonde-haired. Why in this field is the information about the blondes and the Nordics so difficult to get while we're dealing with 8-foot-tall praying mantises, we're dealing with reptilians, we're dealing with all others? Why are the tall and sometimes short blondes so mysterious and the ones that it is the hardest to get information, even in the abductions? Now, on that list, the archeloid, this is the second one. And the second type were genetically engineered by the Ebens through rapid cycle cloning. Our government calls them cloned biological entities, or CBEs, And this illustration of an archeoloid shows a big hooked nose, yellow vertical pupils like a snake or a cat, in large dark eyes, a head with a raised knob that is reminiscent of some of the ancient Anunnaki Sumerian on the planet. It's covered by a ropey headdress, very large ears, as in contrast to what we call the gray androids that are worker bees. That's all they are. They are programmed to do work on different planets. It's like making vacuum cleaners, the little grays that most people have been introduced to. They are not the prime intelligence, and they are not something like this archeoloid. The archeoloid is holding this rod that has this spiral around, and the craft back here. This is what they call in the military, they call them the white eggs, and that there's a very specific group that is always associated with the white egg, which is completely different from the silver lenses, silver spheres, silver cylinders, silver triangles, the list goes on. This is another unique group. This was sketched by a sketch artist when Robert Emenegger and Alan Sandler were making a film and writing a book called UFOs, Past, Present, and Future in the early 1970s, not long after what this event is supposed to all be about. Bob Emenegger had been working for Gray Advertising in Washington, D.C., and Alan Sandler has been a contract agent for the CIA by his own admission going back for decades. Alan Sandler worked in Los Angeles. For those of you who may not understand how the CIA, NSA work with Hollywood, it's called cutouts. All kinds of companies will actually be getting their money and the scripts from the CIA or the NSA because they want to test in through film, or they want to get out information. This was an example. Alan Sandler and Bob Emenegger were doing UFOs, past, present, and future, directly with the Department of Defense. And this did air. UFOs Past, Present, and Future did air in 1974, and the book came out. And Bob Emenegger said that they thought that they were going to get 5,000 or 6,000 feet of film about what this is. A meeting under Project Sigma between our government for the first time in a communication to meet some of the Ebens, and that here is another one of the levels of confusion about why this is so much quicksand. I was told when I was working on my home box office effort, UFOs, the ET Factors, back in 1983, I was exposed to the same material that Bob Emenegger and Sandler were. And then we come together and talk about it. I had one track of information that it came down probably on white sands near the Trinity site on April 25th, 1964 at 6 a.m. And that 12 hours before at 6 p.m. on April 24th is when Lonnie Zamora, the police officer from Socorro, is driving, sees a white egg come down vertically, not horizontally, makes eventually worldwide headlines because the police officer said he could see two little beings that looked like children in snowsuits outside of this vertical egg, but the vertical egg had a red symbol on it. J. Allen Hynek, the astronomer, comes, does an investigation, interviews Lonnie Zamora. When I'm working on the home box office special, and I meet with an AFOSI agent in Albuquerque, I am told that when Sandler and Emenegger put this out in the book and the TV, they gave the location of the meeting as Holloman Air Force Base. I am told in 1983 that was a cover for the real meeting that was at the Trinity site at White Sands. And when you stand back and assume that that's true, then it means that our government would go to the trouble to have an entire operation with helicopters and planes going on at Holloman, south of White Sands, while the real meeting was taking place at White Sands, and they wanted to guarantee that nobody would know. So the deflection, I was told, was Holloman, but that the real meeting was White Sands. It's just a tiny insight about how complex our government has done operations trying to keep all of us in the dark. Well, now, whichever is the original meeting between the non-humans and us, White Sands or Holloman, Bob Emenegger told me himself that he was watching a DoD illustrator holding up some of the 16mm film taken in the meeting against a light with a sketch artist, and that what you're seeing was projected through the 16mm an exact illustration of one of the beings. But this is really interesting. Out of the white egg, the first two beings were the ebens, the ones with the pear-shaped heads, the ones that they trust, the ones that are friendly. Coming behind those two, down a ramp, meeting a scientist and military, this being, taller, steps out and stays in a watchful, protective security role, is the way it was interpreted, while two more white egg craft hover in a defensive position above the one that has landed on the ground. And this being stayed in a doorway the whole time while we met with the ebens. And what Bob Emenegger said they learned from General Weinbrenner and the DoD is that, and he always said to me, Linda, you have to study Akkadian, Assyrian, and Sumerian history to understand some of what we're dealing with. So Bob said these were vertical pupil eyes, ropey headdress, the raised knob, and what they were told is that these beings are the ones that would hold rods, that were translators. They would somehow, through their mind, go into the mind of whoever else it is, and they would do instant telepathy through this rod. I'm going to show you that it isn't confined just to that meeting in April '64. This is a sketch by a Navy quartermaster in 1972 that would have been only, if it were 64, this would have been just about 8 years later. And this was in Oahu, Hawaii. And this was a man who was a quartermaster in the Navy. And he said that he saw black and white photos in a safe when he had to hold up maps and do pointers on maps for the person who was in charge of the Pacific Fleet. And that these were identified as 5.5-foot, big-nosed archeloids, a clone biological entity with vertical pupil eyes, made, genetically produced by the ebens through rapid cycle cloning. So these are the second on the list, made by the first on the list, ebens, making these archeloids. And look at the comparison. We are now back 5,000 years on the right. And this is the Sumerian sun god Shamash in a ropey headdress, holding a rod. Here is the comparison with the illustration. and I have had deep conversations with whistleblowers about the fact that the Sumerians, the Akkadians, the Egyptians, and the Greeks, they were all either pure blood different ETs or a hybridization. And notice, in the context of today's Middle Eastern constant heat, that the drawings of these all have a very large beak to nose. Think about the implications. The implication is that the rods in Sumerian and Egyptian carvings were used by archeoloids to communicate with, manage, and control the Homo sapien, created by manipulation of DNA in already evolving primates to produce workers for Mesopotamia ruled by off-world overseers. But evolving primates were deliberately kept ignorant of the true bigger picture. Government insiders run scared when they realize that the ancient Mesopotamian overseers were actually some form of archeoloids that humans have worshipped as Sumerian or Anunnaki gods. How ironic that the Ebens made the archeoloids, and then the Ebens and the archeoloids made Homo sapien, who worshipped the archeoloids. So the Reagan Briefing introduces the US president to a big picture of Ebens using rapid cycle cloning to genetically create big-nosed archeoloids and the four-fingered quadloids that are a hybrid mix of praying mantis and lizards. And the further revelation that the genetically skilled other intelligences manipulated DNA in already evolving primates to create various models of Homo sapien that have been subjects of an Eben social experiment for thousands of years. That could explain why Earth has been such a haunted planet with so many mysterious phenomena, and why power structures have always ruled with secrecy. In their experimentation, it might be vital to the Ebens to keep humans in the dark about what we really are, why we are, and if our destiny is to ultimately thrive and spread out through the solar system, the Milky Way galaxy and beyond, and to be allies with the Ebens, the archeoloids, the quadloids, and the haploids. But what about the hostile tronoloids? There is one startling answer in the President Reagan briefing in March of 1981, when advisor number 4 talks about the technology of the dangerous tronoloids. Advisor number 4. Mr. President, the tronoloid technology is probably 1,000 years more advanced than ours, maybe even more. Some of their materials are not found on this planet, strange materials, nothing like Earth. We found several strange spots on the Eben and tronoloid star charts. We concluded these spots were space tunnels, as the Ebens had described, shortcuts from one point of space to another. According to the Ebens, the tronoloids use a different form of propulsion, something like matter versus antimatter. A great deal of energy is released, but we do not have that capability to do that. Mr. President, these tronoloid aliens can imitate humans. They can look like blonde humans. However, they are not blonde, but ugly-looking insects. They can imitate looking like humans. The president, how in the world do they do that? They have the ability to change their bodies. As I said before, they are 1,000 years ahead of us in technology and probably every other science. So which tall or short blonde Nordics might be used as camouflage for tronoloids that President Reagan was told were actually dangerous insects? Or are some blondes and red-haired beings trying to help android humanity, such as this Archangel Michael artistry, who historically has fought off dragons and serpents? I have been told by a Washington, D.C. based whistleblower that MJ-12 evolved to a different letter number code that began E2, National Security Space Strategy. Perhaps it is related to an alleged black budget military organization in the Defense Department called E2SCD, the Extraterrestrial Space Command Directorate. A Washington whistleblower also told me that about 2,500 years ago, the Ebens genetically experimented with DNA changes in humans living in Bhutan, Tibet, and Nepal. The result was that some of those altered humans were transplanted to Central America, specifically the Mayans were related to that genetic experimentation. That whistleblower told me that at 850 AD, it wasn't drought. It wasn't anything to do with their food. He said, we know, we have proof that the Ebens came and took their Bhutan genetic experimentation and gathered up all of the Mayans and placed them on another planet, exactly as Reagan was introduced to the concept of the Ebens making the archeloids, the quadloids, the haploids, not the tronoloids. My Washington military source told me that an Eben had communicated telepathically to a U.S. Air Force captain who at a crash site had a telepathic link with one of the beings that was alive. They asked the U.S. Air Force captain to stay with this Eben, who was there from 1949, this was not in 47, and he stayed at Los Alamos with this being until June 18, 1952, when it died of unknown causes. Every day I've been told, and sometimes twice a day, the U.S. Air Force captain would sit in front of a 16mm film, that's what they were using, not video, and this gray being would sit next to him. The whistleblower laughed and said it was a little bit like Charlie McCarthy, like here's the Eben and here's the U.S. Air Force captain, and they aren't talking, they're looking at the camera, but the Air Force guy says, and the Eben says, and they got it all every day for 2.5 years on film that is probably kept in Suitland, Maryland, where the CIA, DIA, NSA, the Atomic Energy Commission have their archives. That film would be something to see because it is, according to the whistleblower, telepathic education and communication from the Eben directly to the U.S. Air Force captain. And here is one of the direct sentences given to me that the Gray said, the Eben said, quote, "We made you, we put you here, but you have to live it," close quote. And that the Ebens watch us live and grow in this complex, multi-layered chess game of their own android creations, having had interactions with our history, and then layered by something out there that the Ebens have no control over and we have no control over, the alleged trontoloid insects that can then camouflage themselves on Earth as blonde humans. This Washington military source also said, "We have proof that the Ebens have been here mixing and matching genes on this Earth laboratory for at least 270 million years." And I said, "That's before the time of the dinosaurs." And he said, "That's right." And he said, "We know that there was a wipeout, but Linda, we don't know why." Because he said, we know that the Ebens could have evaporated a 6-mile diameter asteroid. We know that they could have moved it into timelines. They've demonstrated that ability. And we know that they could move into other dimensions. So why was the asteroid allowed to hit the Earth and destroy 75% of all life on Earth 65 million years ago? And the whistleblower said, quote, "I read in the Yellow Book, and that is supposed to be a holographic technology when Princess Leia in the Star Wars kind of film, when she would come up in the cube and they could hear her and so forth." This man said to me, "It's just exactly." He said, "I think that the Hollywood rendition was a test. We're dealing with technology that is holographic, and that what I've seen from the Yellow Book that comes up in a hologram is that the Ebens knew back 65 million years ago that a very large asteroid was going to hit the Earth. And that what we think they did was allow this to happen, or instigated it to happen, because they wanted to end their 80 million year long experiment with the dinosaurs." And he said, "The Ebens have told us that at the time they were saving one of each species that was on this planet, not just the dinosaurs. They've taken the dinosaurs to another planet, and that planet is like now, that they took one of every, save all the species before the asteroid hit." And I asked him, I said, "Well, it sounds like a Noah's Ark rescue story." He said, "That's right." And I guess they've experimented with life forms here on Earth ever since. But what bothers us is that the Ebens can do anything they want, and they didn't stop that asteroid. He said, "Maybe we are an android experiment, like they made and experimented with the Archeloids. So would the Ebens save us if a big asteroid was headed for Earth or any existential threat?" When you boil the secret Reagan intelligence briefing down, it's about one prime intelligence, the Ebens, that genetically made with rapid cycle cloning the next 2 ET species on that list of 5, and that the Archeloids and the Quadloids would be equivalent to AI androids made to do service for the Ebens. Then allegedly, what do the Ebens do? The Ebens put the Archeloids with the big noses out in the Milky Way galaxy, including the probability that the big-nosed Archeloids with the elongated heads and the ropey headdresses had something to do with the ancient history of this planet, ranging from the Anunnaki to the Sumerian to the Egyptian. The Greeks may be the Heptaloids. And then the Ebens used the quadloid praying mantis lizard to be scientific overseers of other planetary life-seeding projects. Do the Archeloids and the Quadloids know their true history any more than we Homo sapiens sapien know ours? Either way, if the Ebens or the Anunnaki manipulated DNA in already evolving primates on Earth a couple of million years ago, is it fair to ponder that those first Earth humans were artificial intelligence for those that made us from manipulating genes? Like robotic lab scientists today on Earth are manipulating wires and metals and plastics, and now they want to directly hook our brains to computers to replace artificial programmed intelligence in robots. Are we humans actually someone else's androids, and always have been? And now in the 21st century, without yet being publicly introduced to our alien AI makers, we ourselves are now creating other intelligences to be soldiers, truck drivers, cooks, housekeepers, administrators, and the list is going on and on. But what we are making so far is in the machine category and not yet full-blown other organic, artificially produced intelligence. But in the past few months, there were headlines that human scientists have now produced the first primate clones, 2 identical macaque monkeys. They were created by somatic cell nuclear transfer, the same process that created the first clone sheep dolly in 1996. Instead of thinking of AI as metallic machines made and controlled by humans to be weapons, soldiers, truck drivers, and so on, which is what's happening on Earth right now, maybe we should realize that genetic manipulation to make clones, androids, hybrids, and cyborgs has long been the Eben process for distributing their civilization's intelligence and geopolitical control to other planets, solar systems, and galaxies. This past year, I interviewed astrophysicist Brian Greene at Columbia University in New York City. I asked Professor Greene, it almost seems inevitable that Cro-Magnon Homo sapiens sapien will ultimately be replaced by cyborgs. And Professor Greene answered, yes, and many people find that distressing and frightening. And if that's the way things evolve, I'm perfectly fine with it. I'm not particularly wedded to this biological organic form in which we currently reside. And if it turns out that this is a stepping stone en route to a form of life and consciousness that resides in digital and a more technologically oriented housing like cyborgs, I'm okay with that. In fact, maybe that's the way that we will achieve a kind of immortality. In the future, our quote-unquote cyborg descendants, Linda, they may look back on us with pity. You know how sad it was that there was a phase during which this wondrous thing called consciousness and this wondrous thing called life was housed in such a delicate framing that it could only persist for, say, 100 years. How terribly, profoundly sad that so many generations of humans had to live with that kind of constraint. The flesh and blood human body. Thanks for being here.
That was phenomenal, mind-blowing, amazing. That was far out right here in the Wall Street area. So we'll do about 15 minutes of questions. So, but my first question is, where did you get the Reagan document from?
The Reagan document comes from the Serpo material that began being released in 2000, and I believe it was 4, and they released it of almost 40 segments of alleged transcript, and they released a few per year, and by 2007 was the first that the Reagan transcript showed up. And that's when I went to the Washington, D.C. a man who has helped me so much, and I said, can you find out, is this real? And I trust him, and he said it is. And when you think back of the presidents, it was Ronald Reagan who more than once talked about what he and Nancy had seen. We know behind the scenes they were extremely interested in UFOs and ETs. And at that famous screening that Steven Spielberg did for them at the White House, I believe it is true that Reagan leaned over to Steven Spielberg and said, only you and I and a handful know this is real. That would be the Serpo transcript. That would relate to the briefing he got March 6th to 8th, 1981. And it would also explain why Ronald Reagan is the only president on record 3 times saying in national or international settings, if we had a threat from outer space, then we might all come together on Earth. And probably a lot of you heard him or have seen those videos. So I think that probably President Reagan knew a great deal and was being given briefings. What's interesting today, I would love a show of hands. How many of you think that Donald Trump has been briefed? And told, would he have been told about this information I shared? I wonder. I don't know whether he has been. What? Well, okay. No, do you
We're just gonna do a brief commercial here for the assemblage, because Ray's hosting us here. So come on up, and then we'll go back to some questions. So what's your name? Anthony's just gonna talk about the space we're in, and then we'll come back.
Hey everyone, sorry for the introduction. Thank you, Linda. I'm with the Assemblage and I'm a sales manager here. How many of you, it's your first time here at the Assemblage John Street? Cool. And how many of you have been to either Assemblage location or the other Assemblage location before? Okay, cool. So the Assemblage is a co-working space that lies at the intersection of consciousness, technology, and capital. And here at John Street, we're building a hub of innovative technology, focusing on venture capital, blockchain, AI, agritech, different technologies that are pushing our world forward. So if you're interested in taking a quick tour of the space, please find me over there. I'm very easy to find because I'm speaking right now. So otherwise, Linda and Alan will be hosting a Q&A. Thank you.
Yeah, and we'll finish this and then he can take you on tours. I am very interested in your questions because I know this is a little heavy going. And yes, I know you're from England.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Wow.
I was in Manchester in March last year. It was, what, 2,200 people there.
I was about to say that there were not a great big audience here, but everybody wants to know what's going on in the world, And the conference in Manchester, Liverpool, in England rather, was 2,500 people.
That's
We paid a lot of money to talk to hear you, and you were amazing. Now, of course, we all want to know what's going on in the world. What's the agenda? Now, since I saw you last year, I've actually had very close contact with 2 people who claim to have been abducted. And one guy had been in the British military SAS, which is Special Air Services, in Bosnia. And when I told him about the experience of the woman and her 2 brothers who had been abducted in the 1970s, and the description of the reptilian grey alien that dragged them out of the, foot first, out of their tent, took them away and did experiments with, obviously there were DNA experiments, which we wouldn't have known about back in those days. Now when I told the SAS guy about this, he said, Graham, I'm shivering already, because I want to tell you that when I was in Bosnia, we were stuck up a mountain. The British Air Force couldn't pick us up. They said, you'll have to get your own way out of the mountain. It was a big forest mountain. When they came down to the bottom, came into a clearing, they said, you've got to bear in mind, there's 4 big guys here with night vision goggles on, huge guns, and there's a child about 5 years old standing about 20 or 30 foot away from them, shaking. So they went up and said, "Oh, it's okay, don't worry, we're not going to hurt you." That child's face turned into a reptilian face. And then it kept going on, off and on, back to human again. Now, very quickly, I watched a talk by a Barbara Lamb, who you may be familiar with, another lady as well, who claimed that they had had contact with people who had been crossbred with many species of alien, including the insectoid lot. Now, I have to ask you the question at the end of all this: what connection do you think they may have with the robotic stuff that you were talking about earlier? Do you think they might have had some influence, or one species might have had?
One of the most interesting parts, and I didn't go into the prepared, is why was President Reagan not introduced to reptilian humanoids? The only possible implication was in the archeoloids having vertical pupils. There's nothing in the transcript anywhere that goes into reptilians, except that we know, for those of us who have interviewed a lot of people in the abduction syndrome, maybe at least half, it's been interaction with a reptilian. They tell Reagan that there are hostile alien visitors that are insects that can camouflage as blonde humanoids. They don't mention reptilians. Jim Mars and I talked about all of this one day, because Jim and I both had people who came to us and said, I'll give you one example. Jim, I remember the day Jim called, "Linda, call this number right now." And it was a woman telling her first-hand experience. Her father was a politician in Dallas, Texas, had a big office in one of the big skyscrapers in downtown. She had come to have lunch with her father. When she came into his big office that had all glass windows at one end, her father was on the phone, and it was one of those, I'm talking, and she just turned to the windows and waved like, "I'm gonna wait." And she said, "I was hearing my dad, and I was staring out the window just watching the traffic, and I looked at my watch, and I turned. I wanted to say like this to my dad, 'Linda, standing there in the shirt, the tie, the suit of my father was an alligator.'" Now, here's a really interesting reaction, because I think, and Jim did too, I think this is exactly what she did. She couldn't confront her father. She went, "I'm going," and ran out of the office. And she said, "I am talking to you and Jim, and I have never ever asked my father, how did you turn into an alligator?" Now, I'm sharing this because I've run into this before, which may be relevant to why the CIA KC and the NSA and the DIA people there didn't tell Reagan about reptilians. They went as far as there being something hostile that could camouflage as humans. It may have been a deflection point for a President Ronald Reagan, meaning this: if the whole big story is what I was told in December of 1999 by a man who had worked for the Defense Intelligence Agency for 23 years. He was retiring. He had seen my books, Glimpses, Volume 1 and Volume 2. He was rocked by what was in them, because he went to a colleague in the World Bank and said, "I must talk with Linda Moulton Howe." And it took a month to set up this meeting. We all had to travel. He would not let us have a meeting anywhere near where he had worked or where he lived. 7 hours, and to try to bring this in to the complex focus that it is. He said, we were so compartmentalized in the Defense Intelligence Agency. He said, my job was to monitor and analyze the competing territorial conflict of 3 competing extraterrestrial biological civilizations on this planet. I've never forgotten. That's how he said that's what his work was. He said, I'm told I have to read your book. 2 volumes, about 1,000 pages. And he said, and I come to, you have 100 pages in volume 2, and it has illustrations, and it has maps, and it has transcripts, and he said I was in a state of shock. Because I thought that nothing about the rapid cycle cloning in the Serpo, rapid cycle cloning from this guy. And in my book, Glimpses Volume 2, the 6 people had interactions in which they see tubes all lined up. One of them, the room was the size of a football field, said there must have been 1,000 tubes. In the tubes, with light at the top and the bottom, are humans and all kinds of other beings. And he said, I never thought this would ever make the light of day. We worked so hard, we were so compartmentalized that no human anywhere was ever going to know this information. And you have 100 pages in your book. And I said to him, do you guys in the government really think that you're going to control advanced intelligence interaction with humans? He said, we thought we did. All of those 100 pages come from human beings who have had interactions. And why it's important to tell you that in detail is this whole issue. Why would President Reagan have not, if the transcript is literal, why wouldn't he have been told about the reptilians? And especially when you look at world history and what I've just told you, our government knows that there is a rapid cycle cloning technology. It can make anything and it doesn't have to go through baby stages. And the DIA guy told me that the 3 competing civilizations on this planet for at least 270 million years were the Ebens, the reptilians, and the blondes. So hang into this for a second because it's like trying to put a puzzle piece together. If the DIA guy is correct, and he said the reptilians and the blondes have been trying to annihilate each other forever. In Western Europe, a lot of you have probably seen in rock everywhere. In limestone, it is a Angel Michael character that we would assume is blonde-haired and blue-eyed who has a big sword, and it's always carved going down into the throat of a dragon or a snake. It is as if in stone in Western Europe is exactly what the DIA guy told me in 1999 is the pivotal battle. Again, why would the reptilians have been left out of that discussion with Reagan? The only thing so far that I've been able to conclude, when this man says, and we know that the hostile alien visitors can camouflage themselves as human blondes, is this some sort of political strategy that is going on behind the scenes in our government in which they are trying to get a story into some sort of a version that they can announce without people running for the exits. And that there may be an effort by the government to manipulate thought that is not true. This is why it is a 16-layer chess game. It may be that there are not insects disguising themselves as blondes. It may be that there are blondes trying to annihilate reptilians that are camouflaged as blondes. The depth of deception within the different offices of the government is huge. In December, above the fold in the New York Times, when they had that story about the infrared gun camera, and I thought, this is it. They're finally going to start telling some truth. We're finally going to have this cracked open. And there were the two videos, and the New York Times and the Washington Post. What happened? 5 days later, I think it was page 6, the New York Times. Pentagon denies having anything to do with video release. They're always trying to get an angle in which there is easy denial, in which they are manipulating and testing thought. They're testing people's reactions, and it is rarely the whole truth. What I've tried to do tonight, scared that I might go too far, but I think that the time is right for people who are trying to understand what the truth is behind politically repressive regimes, which include our country and our government. We are and have been kept so far in the dark and manipulated for at least 5,000 years as a conscious Earth species, completely and totally left out of truth. And that is a fact. And if we're going to go forward at an intersection where we are now about and are in the process of taking algorithms and making military robots that can turn around and kill, then we are at that juncture where the same thing is echoed by looking at what has been presented through the whistleblowers in the whole alien story, that's what they've done. They've made all of these biologically engineered life forms to put out on planets, including this one. We are going to continue to be so disabled as a species if we're not told the truth. To me, in truth, that's when we begin to stand on our own 2 feet as a species, not manipulated into war and tribal warfare. And that is why I do the work I do. And I have a feeling that more and more audiences, you and I saw over 2,000 people in Manchester in March. They were mostly in their 30s and their 40s with kids. And I presented another, it was a very complex program. And they just jumped up and everybody was screaming. And I thought, people are so hungry for some kind of truth that isn't going through a political spaghetti machine. And that's where tonight, in this group, and in my Earth Files YouTube channel and the radio programs I do, Coast to Coast AM and Phenomenon Radio and Ancient Aliens. We're in our 11th season on Ancient Aliens. And for those who might not know, Ancient Aliens is now the #1 television program in all of India. Yeah, we're up there around the planet in several. You do have to go? We do. Oh, okay. What happens? It turns into a pumpkin? Are they waiting? Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, anyway, it's been wonderful, and I'm happy to stay around and take your questions.
Thank you, the Assemblage. There's a tour for people who want to look at the space. Thank you, Dan and Just One. And there's an elixir bar here that's pretty amazing, herbal elixirs. And on the third floor, there's great places to eat. There's a great place to eat with vegan